So if there's some lingering question that needs clarification, now's a good time to ask. Or some topic that you're interested in exploring shortly.
Greetings. Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday.
I have a question. It's a personal practice question, and see if you're comfortable in sharing. Question around our own human illnesses or health issues as we continue to age and as we lose capacity and change in our how we know ourselves. What for your own self personally, what Dharma and life tools have you used to help you turn perhaps the illnesses you may have experienced or changes in your physical, mental, or emotional capacities? How do you turn all of this into your own Dharma practice to work with, the emotions that come up, the physical feelings that come up, all of that? So that's, does this make sense?
It's a big order.
Because I notice my earth suit has, over this last several years, changed more in my life than it has over many, 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 many years. And it was kind of a shock.
Yeah.
And it's like, holy petunias. So I thought I'd ask you, as a very dear and honest and skilled practitioner and teacher, how do you deal with the unpleasant things that our human experience brings into your life?
Well, sometimes we make it too complicated. And sometimes we maybe misunderstand the proposition that Kala Rinpoche gave a few times way back in the early 70s. And when I still thought things were simple. And so it took a while to understand a statement that he made that later became really important personally. And I think it's a proposal that might be helpful. He was giving some teachings on Chenrezig and a few other things which I now cannot recall the details of. But the thing that struck me was that at a certain point he said that the entire Dharma, and he gave some examples of what he meant by entire Dharma, which was, kind of like the Congressional Library in its breadth, just like really extreme, disappointing in the sense that there's no hope that I could ever master that. But then he went on to say the antidote to all of that was that the entire Dharma, all the teachings of the Buddha, are contained in every teaching the Buddha gave. And that also didn't sink in right away, but it sounded good. And later on, then we asked some questions, and he said, if you can find in all of the Dharma a teaching which is helpful to you and that you consistently engage in that practice,
Mm-hmm.
that over time, the entire Dharma will be revealed by that very thing that you recall every day, that you practice every day. In other words, it wasn't like just you could find it like it was some big precious diamond that you could just turn in at the bank somehow. You had to engage and continue to work with that thing that you had discovered. But he gave some examples, none of which precisely I can remember, but he gave some examples of things that were really quite simple. And I think we have lots of examples that he might have said, though I can't remember exactly which ones he used. But I think they were things, for example, like when we practice for the benefit of others. If that particular piece sings to you and it's helpful for you, and when you wake up in the morning and you don't feel good or you don't feel like getting out of bed on that day, you recall, I'm going to get out of bed for others, not for myself. Then you're engaging in that practice. So he wasn't saying specifically do anything like that. It was more like you find something that inspires you, that works for you, and you can discover the entire path through that one thing. So I suspect that there was much more to it than what he said, but I also think there's a certain way in which that's just actually what he meant, was that you didn't need to actually learn that much, but you needed to consistently engage in the practice of it, whatever it was.
So that would be your field of practice then, calling to mind something for me that is extremely meaningful. Also having validated the truth of the Dharma for me, looking at suffering in my life, where it comes from, the truth of it, of sickness, aging, and death. But also I'm not alone in experiencing that. It's universal. Absolutely every human being experiences that exact same thing. So if I really can feel connected with, as you mentioned, deep compassion for others because I'm aware, hey, they're going through the same thing I am. And actually, in this last season, I've needed many health professionals to help me through my journey. Without their help and guidance and love and support and kindness, I wouldn't be here. Or if I were, I'd be in a lot more pain and distress than I'm currently experiencing. So it really validated my connection with other people, and it really showed me the truth of the Dharma. So I guess that's one of the pieces I can remind myself.
I think that's it. That's it. So as long as I've known you, you have always been focused on the benefit of others. And of course, that's a big piece of the entire Buddha Dharma, is like the focus on the benefit of others. Even we naturally, when we sit down to meditate, there's a natural inclination that we have that might be something like, I hope that my mind is still. I hope that the anger I had yesterday with so-and-so is gone today, or something. In other words, we're looking for our own benefit in the practice itself. And it might be that we make a discovery by focusing on the benefit of others. When we engage in the practice, we just think about the wish that whatever realization I might come to, that it would become helpful for others. It's simple. You already know this. So many times we've talked about it, you and I and others like yourself. You already know this. You focus on that, and you're kind of in the stream that you need to be in.
This is just sort of like a pop quiz. Have I really learned this, and do I know it? And everything I've ever been through has been used by Life's Mystery to be of service to other people who have been through the same thing or will go through the same thing.
Yeah.
So I guess just to remind myself of that, and also remind me to be compassionate to myself if sometimes I lose perspective or get a discouraged mind.
Yeah. And even when you remind yourself of being compassionate for yourself, you also can turn that into the next step, which is, while I have compassion for myself, may the fruit of that compassion ripen in others.
Right.
So not so difficult to maintain what you have always been good at doing. So why go and look for something new? You know, you have the means, and and it's profound. So every great teacher we've ever heard speak will talk about the importance of aspiration bodhicitta, which is the wish that I will accomplish the Dharma, and the degree to which I accomplish it will be for the benefit of others, and I'll continue, and it will just kind of roll out like that. And the benefit of that also accrues beyond the boundaries of this life, which is the other piece which is so important. Sometimes we grieve that we have not lived long enough. So many people I know will say, I wish I had encountered the Dharma when I was younger.
Yes, me too.
And it's I think helpful to say, you did. Because if you hadn't, we wouldn't be here.
No.
So just hold that view that things are not bounded into little boxes and sections and doses of things. In fact, what we experience is the result of everything that we have already experienced, thought, done, said. It just rolls forward like that. It's easy to be confident in that, and confidence is also really helpful with it, so that when you make positive wishes for the benefit of others, you understand that having made that wish itself is actually beneficial for others.
Thank you. Thank you. And I assume you do that for yourself as well too. Follow these same kind of things.
No, I don't do those things. I rely on you to do them for me. It's good to see you, Bob.
I actually have a question. Someone asked me a question recently, and I said, I do not know the answer to this, and it's a good question, so I'm going to try to remember to ask my teachers. Someone who has just been practicing for a little while and wants to start reading more Dharma teachings, and told me that she felt overwhelmed by like so many different Dharma writers, and I said, well, it can be sometimes helpful to start out with, contemporary living Western ones, to kind of get in and get into the field. And she said, these books by, Ken MacLeod and Noah Levine look good, but I know that now, they've been, accused of sexual misconduct, and should I avoid those books, even though those are the ones that are kind of catching my eye when I'm looking through the writings and thinking of things to read? And I said, I don't actually know the answer to that, because I do know that those people have been people that I read in the past and that were regarded as, respected contemporary Dharma teachers, and now they are, in some hot water and, during the Me Too movement. And so I'm just wondering, if you have, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if you have thoughts on, do we kind of set some of those writers aside now and no longer really recommend those, or I just didn't know, so I thought I would ask.
I get the issue. sometimes we hold ourselves to a standard that we cannot live up to. I'm talking about you and me and other people, just ordinary people. We tend to do that. And sometimes it has a huge impact on our lives, and other times it doesn't. But I think that you can find a large number of teachers who have made mistakes, big and small. Some of them have been renowned teachers, others have been kind of unknown. But my sense is, if you understand the Dharma enough, rely upon what you understand. So there are people that I don't tend to read because I know things about them. And in a certain way, that's a problem, because they may actually have penned some excellent teachings, and I'm skipping past them because of something I know about them, which has nothing to do with whether or not the Dharma I'm reading is authentic. So I don't think that there's a black and white I don't think there's a black and white answer to this. I think we need to investigate all the things that we read, take a good look at the teachers that we study with, and ask the questions like, is this somebody that I can rely upon or that I should rely upon? One of the most important things in our practice of the Dharma is confidence. It's really important. In fact, a couple of teachers who I have admired greatly and still do have said, if you don't have confidence, your Dharma will fail. You will not succeed. So I think that's true in my own experience. If I don't have confidence, I begin to leak around the edges in the sense of losing my ability to even be interested in the practices. So it's critical, of course. You won't do anything if you're not interested in it. So the interest seems to be like the first thing is that. But then when you actually engage in the practice, it's really important to gain a level of confidence that you can build upon. Because the more confidence that you have, and of course it's got to be like authentic, you can't just make it up, but the more confidence that you have, the more effective your practice becomes. So in some ways you have to kind of go through the search that you mentioned earlier to find the thing that sings to you. And sometimes it's helpful to share your concerns and share your insights with what you've read with others who you might trust. Like, what do you think about this? What do you know about this person, for example? Like, if you tell me this person's okay, maybe I'll read this a little easier somehow. Because there have been many things that have been written by people whose lives are not necessarily exemplary, but their erudition of the Dharma sometimes is actually excellent. So, not to excuse the problems that someone may have created for themselves and others, but more important is to find an authentic spiritual path and engage in it. So whatever it takes to do that, pretty much it's worth it. And if you feel like, I really can't quite read this book because what I read about this person, then put that aside. Put it aside with no judgment, if you can, about the person who wrote it. It's kind of like, You could even make the wish that someone who picks that book up will actually be inspired by it. Because there's a lot of books written by people who you would not want to emulate for their lifestyle, and yet what they have written or what they have taught is actually profoundly helpful. And unfortunately, many of us, myself included, have found ourselves not able to engage in those practices because we knew who wrote it. That's unfortunate, and that's part of our work that we need to do. That is, if the teachings are helpful, then they're worth taking a look at, no matter who wrote it. So you can't get the confidence that you need if the person who wrote it is really somebody who you feel is really bad. It's almost impossible to get the confidence. But not all teachings are written by people who are really highly realized beings. Many of them are written by people who are not so exalted. And yet, you open up the book and you may find in there something which is extremely helpful. So you wouldn't want to throw that away just because the person who wrote it maybe has a bad reputation. And there's a lot of those these days, quite a few, who have, we could say, kind of fallen by virtue of their activities and relationships with others. And yet, the same person wrote texts that we sit down and study, and we're inspired by them before we find out what this person did. So it's an interesting example where it still is the case that the teachings that were written down are helpful. And if you can put aside who wrote it and just be grateful that somebody penned that and that it works for you, that's one possibility. But if you can't, then you just got to move on.
Thanks.
The problem, of course, is the person who's been the great example, then you sit down and you practice using those teachings, and later on down the road, they do some things which are not so good. So this actually is the fault of those teachers. So what we say is that the teacher is responsible for that. Even if you give authentic teachings, and then you engage in activities which are not in accordance with the Dharma, and the result is that people no longer can practice those teachings because of that, that's a problem for the teacher also. So good to keep that in mind. They have a responsibility to live up to a certain standard so that people will actually be drawn to and engage in the practices. But there's nothing you can do if they don't do it. But continue to look at the teachings from the perspective of maybe I can't study and do these things, but I hope somebody can and benefits by it. We always wish that all of our teachers would match a standard that is beyond our own currently, and that they would stick to that or excel in that so that we would be inspired to continue to follow that. It's not always so straightforward.
This is a really question of our time, so I'm glad you brought it forward. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I had this memory of getting really, really angry at my teacher, Venerable Chitran, when I was getting very close with her, and we had some differences, and they got a little bit testy, or maybe a lot. And I went to another teacher who knew her and respected her, and who I knew and respected. Soto Zen teacher, and just laid out, how upset I was and what happened. And that teacher told me something that was very helpful. It wasn't like the answer, but it was kind of showing what the koan looks like that we're having to work with. And she said, you need to remember two things, actually. First of all, your teacher only has a 1-point program for you, and that is your liberation, period. The teacher doesn't have any other agenda for you. And that was true. I could see that, like, no matter what happened, that's what my teacher's intention is toward me and all of her students. And the other thing she said, which I'm still puzzling over constantly, is all students need to remember your teacher's the Buddha and your teacher's a human. And they're never not going to be both of those. And those can be complicated at times. So when Lama Michael says confidence, what jumps up in my mind is the way I've been working with that is confidence in what? And I realize more and more I'm not trying for confidence in that human. That's just another false refuge. We're human. We can't, just like Lama Michael said, we can't, we aren't able, most of us, certainly me, to live to the standard we would want to every minute, right? We don't. And yet we're serious practitioners, and we have these aspirations. And so my confidence, it reminds me of the old saying of, don't get confused between the finger pointing at the moon and the moon being the Dharma, the finger's the teacher. And we can get really stuck on the teacher as a personality. And then when they, quote, fail, because they're human, then we get all mixed up. We can't see the moon anymore. We don't even know where we were going. You know what I'm saying? So it's just, my confidence is in the Dharma the person has, the Dharma the person carries. And if I can see that and benefit from it, then I'm okay. I don't have to worry about all the crazy stuff they may do or not do. I mean, if they got abusive, I wouldn't stay, and I would let other people know. There's also that human element there. But that's the way I work it, is confidence in what? When I bow to a teacher, I'm bowing to the Dharma they carry. That's all. I'm not bowing to that person. But the Dharma they carry is really important, really precious. So that's how I work with it. And it's difficult. Human Buddha, human Buddha, human Buddha. So.
Thanks.
Is that okay? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Juditha, yeah.
Thanks. So I'm thinking about confidence. If I truly had confidence that a wish for someone would help them, I'd probably be wishing all day. And I'm not. And so I'm wondering how to increase confidence. I was reading the other day something in Padmasambhava's book about when you make a wish for someone, it really does help them. And I thought, I don't have that confidence. I'd like to. My Western mind says if it's true, I would like to have that confidence. That's a preface.
That's a what?
A preface to my question. And the first part is when we say unborn awareness or the nature of mind or Dharmakaya, are we pointing at the same thing?
Pretty much. Good enough.
Okay. This morning, I think I heard you say that the Dharmakaya doesn't have any agenda.
It's not what?
It has no agenda.
No agenda. Yeah. Not that we know of.
What do I know? It seems like we have an agenda to be able to help all sentient beings to achieve, liberation for the sake of all sentient beings. And that seems like a really big agenda.
The liberation.
The hope, the wish, the intention, if possible, to do that. That's a big agenda.
I would say, I'm not sure how you would characterize it in terms of big, but but just
huge.
Okay, I get it. Yeah.
So okay.
So say that again. What is the agenda there? What is that?
To benefit all sentient beings.
Okay, that's good enough.
Okay.
Thanks.
So
I can do that.
I'm gonna follow you.
No, you can do it too. Because all you need to do is make that aspiration. And of course, to make the aspiration once gives you something, but it's kind of like it's just like water is dripping out of the faucet. It's not really running out yet. But if you make that aspiration, let's go to the other extreme. Let's say that you have developed the habit. Buddhists aren't supposed to have habits, I think, but actually a lot of the things we do are focused on developing habits. So you could say that if every time that I'm about to speak, the first thing that let's imagine that you have practiced this and you have this kind of as a habit. The habit is that every time you're about to speak, the first thing you do before you speak is you hold the aspiration that what I'm about to say is nothing but helpful for all beings. And that was your total practice in this life. How many times do we speak in a day? And how much effect does it have to hold the wish that what I'm about to say, which I don't even know what it is yet, but whatever it is, I hope that it benefits all sentient beings without a single exception. That affects our mind to just... Who dares to do this? So we affect our own minds by planting the seed of the wish that whatever I'm about to say or do or think, that it will benefit all sentient beings. And of course, if we try to test the water to see whether it worked after having done it once, we will find nothing, usually. But if you do it over and over and over and over, day after day after day, year after year after year after year, you can see the difference. Because when you preface everything, I'm about to say something, and I preface it with, my only wish is that it will be beneficial for all beings. As opposed to all the other prefaces we use, like, well, I hope this takes care of that person. somehow, or that it manages to get me something that I haven't been able to get yet. All the things that we feed our minds is the result is what we think and experience on a daily basis. So to just have a kindly thought about all sentient beings every time we open our mouths will unquestionably have an enormous impact on our mental states and our minds. It can't not happen because we do it all the time anyway. All we're talking about is changing the modality of it and approaching it from a little different direction. And my guess is for most of us, we don't have to do it for very long before we feel personal benefit from making that wish. Having felt the personal benefit from it, we then might have a certain sense of, well, wait a minute here. I'm making this wish for others. And yet I'm gaining some kind of benefit. So then you have to add on to that, the benefit that I receive by saying this, may it become the benefit for all sentient beings. So we just start folding it into itself. It gets larger and larger, like you said. It is not a martyr tradition, which most of us know. This is not to lose all the benefit that we have had by wishing that others benefit from what I do, think, and say. Instead, the benefit overall grows and grows and grows. We witness it in our own mind stream, and we can witness it in others too when we meet others and we speak with them and have a relationship of some kind. We can see that we begin to have some confidence in the methodology. It's a simple method. Not so simple when we're trying to do it with all beings, and there's a tendency from time to time to think, it's easy for me to do this with all beings, but I don't know about this person. And there's nothing wrong with that. So that's important that we don't beat ourselves up for things, because it's ordinary to have negative feelings about each other. That's just common. The issue isn't whether or not we ever have negative feelings, but what do we do about them? What do we do with them when we recognize them, I think, is the big thing. Do we use them against others? Do we use them against ourselves? Anyway, I think that answers the question of confidence. I don't know about the rest of it, but
I have confidence in what you've laid out, that the practices change the mind stream, the wish for others really has this effect, and the long game is a really long game. I have confidence in a really long game, but the confidence that when I have a wish for someone, it benefits them, the wish, not the speech or the relationship or even being with them, but the wish for them, say, a family member across the country.
yeah.
That's harder for me to have confidence in, but I'm trying to work that out. And so my question is, if the Dharmakaya has no agenda, and we kind of have an agenda, when that motivation, that pure motivation, meets with, the Dharmakaya, is that where the potential is?
Is that where what is?
The potential that a wish.
The Dharmakaya?
Yeah, I'm wondering, and I've got this, it's too complicated, I know, but is there wisdom and skillful means coming together in that, in a way that, we can have some confidence in?
Well, first of all, I would backburner the Dharmakaya. Only because what we're trying to do here is, I think, is understand what we're doing enough so that we can have the experience of what we're doing and have some confidence in the method that we're using. And yeah, we can talk about the Dharmakaya and various things about that may or may not be inspiring, but on the whole, for people, maybe the conversation needs to be moved somewhere else. It's a little esoteric and maybe not so helpful in the way that we're just trying to get at this thing. What you do with your body, your speech, and your mind will affect what you experience forward from that place, whatever you did. It's really just another way of saying interdependence is complete. It's not like some things are interdependent and other things aren't. That they're all interdependent. And the result of that is you can be sure that what you fill your mind with will bear the fruit that comes from filling the mind with that thing, whatever it is. So a lot of the practices, maybe you could say all the practices, are designed for us to engage in body, speech, and mind. That is to say, what we do with our bodies and our speech and our minds, that's designed so that what we do with those things, if we follow the instructions for it, try to develop the habit of putting our attention on the benefit of others, for example, the benefit from that will return. And it will return especially when we really put the emphasis on the benefit of others. So we do trick ourselves from time to time in the manner of perhaps quietly asking, well, what about me? We have sometimes talked about the, I want to call it a proposition, that we rely upon the benefit of others and holding the wish of the benefit of others in order to accomplish our own benefit. Like, we really can't intentionally accomplish our own benefit in a spiritual sense, because as soon as we make the aspiration to accomplish our own benefit, we're compromising the very thing we're wishing for. So it's important to hold the wish with no regard for what comes back to us. And of course, that's tricky. We want to hold the wish with no regard for what we might get from it. But if we watch closely while we're doing that, we'll often see that we're secretly holding the wish, or at least hopefully secretly, but not really secretly enough, that we actually are going to get significant benefit from it. And the benefit may be in proportion to how little we expect from it and how big we wish that others will benefit.
Help me with what you just said, because basically that puts me in a downspin. And it's because if I really believe, or if I really take your words that every thought, action, and what's the other thing? Thought, action, and speech has that effect, then I don't want to do anything because I'm really scared. And that's what it does to me. It doesn't make me confident.
But are there things that you do that have no consequence? So just step.
I mean, for me to say, okay, I'm going to keep, Don't you understand, though, how it makes me feel like if I'm going to do this only for other people's benefit, and I right now I can sink into such a hard place, and it is so dark, and that's just what's happening. And so I'm not. So then I hear what you're saying, and it's like, okay, I'm not doing very good. Then I'm really being even more of a shit than I think.
There's nothing wrong with taking care of yourself. There's no judgment on taking care of ourselves and doing what it is that we need to do. So are you hearing that there is a judgment there, or what?
No, it's not so much I'm hearing that there's a judgment. I'm just hearing, oh, maybe that is what I'm doing. Because I just know right now I lack so much confidence. And I know that what happens then when I'm hearing what you're sharing, that it's like, and I know part of it is I'm just experiencing it too black and white in this way, and I know that, but I know that can really, I don't know, that can just really take me there.
Say that again. Say it a little louder.
Oh, I said I just know that can take me there.
But I'm not catching it.
I just said I know that can take me there. I mean, I can just, and
What will take you?
You know, I can't even tell you, Michael. What am I saying? I don't know where that was coming from. Okay.
I want to say it's an unusual person who can at all times hold the wish that whatever I'm thinking or doing or saying will benefit others. That's a very unusual person. So when we talk about those things, I think we need to understand that what we are trying to do is lift ourselves up into a different state. And there's no penalty, particularly, if we can't do that for whatever the reason is. It's more an issue of, if you can do more of that, you may find that it's helpful. On the other hand, because we are not in control of the way that all of the causes and conditions and things that we live in, we're not in control of all of those things. So we may find, and I think I can speak from my own experience, and I've known many people who have said, when I engage in certain Dharma practices, I feel depressed from it. I have felt that. In fact, I have abandoned practices in the past for periods of time because it just felt untenable somehow. It just doesn't work for me. But that doesn't mean that I lose ground or that I can't at any moment begin another practice in a different direction and engage in things which are helpful. So there's no contradiction between that. It's, my guess is you could ask, pick any of the 3 greatest beings that you know who are alive and go and ask them, and I suspect that every one of them will say, "Whoa, I've been in really dark places." I just believe that because I have heard it from a few people who were surprising. It's not, I think the difference is that it's helpful to be encouraged in a direction which we have some confidence that direction will be helpful. But the truth also is that we can't always get up with a smile on our face every morning. It just doesn't work. And if it does, it hurts even more when we can't really do it and we just try to look like we do it. So it's really a progressive thing. It's not like this is a formula that if you recite this formula, you will have a positive experience. It doesn't always work that way. You and I both know that. So we sit here and we try to encourage each other, and even the encouragement doesn't always work. So, I could take you out and get you an ice cream cone, and that might actually work better. It's like, so, I think the truth is that the Dharma is many things. It is not a single thing, and it's often easy to wish positive things for others, and there's times when we can barely stand ourselves to get up and move. It's helpful to have good friends, whether they know the Dharma or not, Is it okay?
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
Yeah, thank you all for your bravery.
Thank you.